You know what's interesting? February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. The streets are still littered with red confetti. Drugstore shelves are half empty of chocolate boxes, and suddenly there's this strange quiet that settles in. For some people, it's a relief, like the pressure valve finally released. But for others, it's something else entirely. It's this heavy, sinking feeling that sits in your chest, uninvited and surprisingly persistent. You scroll through your social media feed and see all those couples' photos from the night before, the romantic dinners, the flowers, the declarations of love, and you feel it. That sharp, almost physical ache of loneliness. And here's what makes it so confusing. You might not have even cared that much about Valentine's Day itself. You might have even rolled your eyes at the commercialization of it all. But now, in the aftermath, you feel lonely, deeply, genuinely lonely. So what's going on here? Why does this one day, this arbitrary date on the calendar, have the power to make us feel so isolated? Let me tell you something about your brain. It's constantly looking for patterns, constantly comparing, constantly trying to figure out where you stand in the social hierarchy. It's an ancient survival mechanism, this need to belong. Thousands of years ago, being part of a tribe wasn't just nice to have, it was literally the difference between life and death. If you were cast out, if you were alone, your chances of survival plummeted. So your brain evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social rejection, to signs that you might not belong. And Valentine's Day? It's basically a giant neon sign that highlights one very specific type of belonging, romantic partnership. And when that day passes and you're not part of that particular club, your brain interprets it as a threat, even though rationally you know you're perfectly safe. There's this concept in psychology called social comparison theory, introduced by Leon Festinger back in 1954. The basic idea is that we determine our own worth by comparing ourselves to others. It's not that we want to do this, it's that we can't help it. And in the age of social media, this comparison happens constantly, relentlessly, whether we're conscious of it or not. So imagine this. For weeks leading up to February 14th, you're bombarded with messages about love, romance, and relationships. Every commercial, every storefront, every conversation seems to revolve around couples. Then the day arrives and your feed explodes with carefully curated moments of romantic bliss. And here's the thing. Even if you know intellectually that those photos represent maybe 2 hours of someone's life, even if you know they're staged and filtered and don't represent the full complexity of anyone's relationship, your brain still processes them as evidence. Evidence that everyone else has something you don't. And this is where it gets really interesting. Research by John Cacioppo, one of the leading experts on loneliness, showed that loneliness isn't just about being physically alone. You can be surrounded by people and still feel desperately lonely. Loneliness is about perceived social isolation, about feeling disconnected from meaningful relationships. It's subjective, not objective. So after Valentine's Day, even if your daily life hasn't changed at all, even if you have friends and family who love you, you might still feel lonely because you're suddenly hyper-aware of a specific type of connection you're missing. The cultural spotlight has been shining so brightly on romantic love that everything else fades into the background for a moment. Think of it like this. Imagine you're walking through your neighborhood every day and you never really notice the houses around you. They're just there, part of the landscape. But then one day there's a massive block party on your street and everyone is outside celebrating together, laughing, sharing food, and you weren't invited. Suddenly, those same houses you never paid attention to feel different. You feel on the outside looking in. That's essentially what Valentine's Day does. It creates this collective celebration of romantic partnership, and if you're not participating, it can trigger feelings of exclusion that weren't there the day before. But here's what's really fascinating about post-Valentine's loneliness. It often comes with this added layer of shame or embarrassment because we live in a culture that tells us we should be self-sufficient, that we shouldn't need validation from relationships, that being single should be empowering and liberating. And for many people, it absolutely is. But then Valentine's Day rolls around and you feel sad about being alone, and suddenly you're judging yourself for having those feelings. You're thinking, why do I even care? This is ridiculous. I'm better than this. And that self-judgment only makes the loneliness worse. It's loneliness compounded by the shame of feeling lonely. Psychologists call this meta-emotion, which is basically feeling something about your feelings. And it creates this vicious cycle. You feel lonely, then you feel stupid for feeling lonely. Then you feel more isolated because you think you shouldn't be sharing these feelings with anyone because they're irrational or weak. So you end up keeping it all inside, which, ironically, is exactly what perpetuates loneliness. Because loneliness thrives in silence and secrecy, there's also this temporal aspect to consider. Valentine's Day falls in February, which in many parts of the world is still deep winter. The holidays are over, the excitement of a new year has worn off, and spring still feels far away. Some researchers have noted that this time of year can already be psychologically challenging due to seasonal affective patterns and the general winter blues. So Valentine's Day might not be creating loneliness from scratch, it might be amplifying feelings that were already lurking beneath the surface, giving them a focal point, a specific reason to emerge. And let's talk about what loneliness actually does to you, because understanding this might help you be more compassionate with yourself. Chronic loneliness has been compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of its impact on your health. It affects your immune system, your sleep quality, your cognitive function, even your lifespan. But here's the key word: chronic. Feeling lonely after Valentine's Day, feeling that acute sting of social comparison, that's not the same as chronic loneliness. That's a moment, a reaction to a specific cultural event. It's your brain doing what it's designed to do, which is pay attention to your social environment and alert you when something feels off. The problem is when you interpret that signal as evidence of some fundamental flaw in yourself rather than what it actually is, a completely normal response to a society-wide celebration of something you currently don't have. It's like feeling hungry when you walk past a bakery. Oh, the smell triggers your appetite, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means your senses are working exactly as they should. So what do you do with this information? How do you sit with post-Valentine's loneliness without letting it consume you? First, you acknowledge it without judgment. You say to yourself, yeah, I'm feeling lonely right now, and that makes sense given the context. You don't try to logic your way out of it or convince yourself you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. You just let it be there. Because emotions are like waves, they rise and they fall, but only if you don't resist them. The more you fight an emotion, the longer it sticks around. Second, you reach out. And I know that's the last thing you want to do when you're feeling lonely, because loneliness has this sneaky way of convincing you that nobody wants to hear from you, that you'd be burdening people, that you're the only one feeling this way. But research consistently shows that connection is the antidote to loneliness, and it doesn't have to be romantic connection. Call a friend, text your sibling, join an online community about something you're interested in. The act of reaching out, even in small ways, starts to shift your brain out of that isolated state. And third, remind yourself that Valentine's Day is a snapshot, not the whole picture. Your life is a long, complex narrative with countless chapters, and this is just one day, one moment. The people in those perfect couple photos have their own struggles, their own lonely moments, their own challenges that you can't see. Everyone, and I mean everyone, feels lonely sometimes. It's part of being human. The only difference is how we talk about it and how we move through it. Here's the beautiful paradox. Acknowledging your loneliness, being honest about it, is actually what connects you to other people. Because when you're vulnerable about your struggles, you give others permission to be vulnerable too. You break the illusion that everyone else has it all figured out. And in that honesty, in that shared human experience of sometimes feeling on the outside looking in, you find real connection. The kind that doesn't need a holiday to validate it. So if you're feeling lonely after Valentine's Day, know that you're not broken. You're not pathetic. You're not failing at life. You're just human, with a human brain that's wired for connection, living in a world that sometimes makes you feel like you're missing out. But you're not missing out on life. Or right in the middle of it. Feeling all the complicated, messy, beautiful feelings that come with being alive. And that in itself is something worth honoring. Maybe drop a comment below if this resonated with you. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone and feeling alone makes all the difference. Take care of yourself out there.